since I last updated the House in my opening remarks of the debate on Ukraine on the 11th of September, the situation on the ground remains largely unchanged. Slow and steady progress is being made by the Ukrainian armed forces, who continue to grind their way through the main Russian defensive position. Defence intelligence estimate that Russian permanent casualties, in other words, those who are dead or so seriously wounded that they cannot return to action, now stands at between 150 and 190,000 troops. Total casualties are estimated to number up to 290,000. A limited Russian offensive is underway at Avdiivka on the outskirts of Donetsk city. Fighting has been fierce, and we assess that the average daily casualty rate for the Russian army was around 800 per day in the first week of the offensive. As ever, Putin and his generals show no more regard for the lives of their own troops than they do for the people of Ukraine. However, Mr. Speaker, even this ex-soldier can admit that wars aren't only about the fight on the land. Since the last debate on Ukraine, the Ukrainians have opened up a new front in the Black Sea, destroying a Kilo-class submarine and 2 amphibious ships, as well as a successful strike on the Russian Black Sea Fleet headquarters. The consequence, as President Zelensky has rightly said, is that the Russian Black Sea Fleet is no longer capable of resistance in the Western Black Sea. So, Mr. Speaker, as we move beyond day 608 to be precise, of Putin's 3-day illegal war, he's still not achieved any of his initial strategic aims, and he's now ceded sea control in the Western Black Sea to a nation without a navy. Mr. Speaker, the UK continues to donate significant amounts of ammunition and material paid for from the £2.3 billion commitment for this financial year, which follows the same amount from the year beforehand. And this is an important point. Our gifting is about more than the headline-making capabilities like Challenger 2 or Storm Shadow. It is in the delivery, month after month, of tens of thousands of artillery rounds, air defence missiles and other small but necessary equipment that positions the UK as one of the biggest and most influential of Ukraine's donors. The UK is also the only country to have trained soldiers, sailors, aviators and marines in support of the Ukrainian effort. We have now trained over 50,000 soldiers, sailors, aviators and marines since 2014. Mr. Speaker, events in the Middle East have dominated the headlines, but in the MOD and across the UK government, and clearly from His Majesty's opposition in that they have brought this urgent question today, Ukraine remains a focus. And I think that it will matter enormously to our friends and colleagues in Kyiv that they see that in this very timely question today. Mr. Speaker, I remain every bit as confident today as I have been on all my previous visits to the dispatch box over the last 2 years that Ukraine can and will prevail.
John Healy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members across the House and people across the world will be and are rightly focused on the Middle East after Hamas's horrific attacks. This terrorism must be condemned, civilians must be protected, humanitarian corridors opened, international law followed and escalation risks managed. I welcome the Defence Secretary's Gulf visit later this week and I hope we'll hear from him in this House to report back. I also welcome President Biden's Oval Office address when he said, Hamas and Putin represent different threats, but they share this in common. They both want to completely annihilate a neighbouring democracy. Today, let President Putin know the UK remains focused on and united in solidarity with Ukraine. Last week, as the Minister said, we passed the grim 600-day milestone since Putin's illegal invasion of Ukraine. War still rages, cities still bombed, civilians still raped and killed. Ukraine has made important gains in recent days on the Dnipro River. Can the Minister update us on this? Mr. Speaker, I'm proud of the UK leadership on Ukraine, but we must work to maintain this leadership and accelerate support. And I fear the UK momentum is flagging. No Ukraine statement to Parliament from the new Defence Secretary since his appointment in August. No statement from any Defence Secretary in this House since May. Now, Labour backs the recent UK military aid announcements, new British Army training to protect critical infrastructure, 100 million with allies from the International Fund for Ukraine. But Ukrainians are asking for winter support, for air defence, more ammunition. Where's the UK's planned response? Mr. Speaker, no new money for military aid for Ukraine has been committed by this Prime Minister. The £2.3 billion for this year was pledged by his predecessor. The £2.3 billion for last year was pledged by her predecessor. This year's money runs out in March. And 7 months after announcing £2 billion for UK stockpiles in the spring budget, not a penny has been spent, not a single contract has been signed. Why? Mr. Speaker, Putin must be defeated just like Hamas must be defeated. We must not step back. We must stand with Ukraine for as long as it takes to win.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I echo the Right Honourable Gentleman's words about the despicable attack from Hamas and the absolute right of Israel to defend itself. I also, as I said in my opening response, believe very strongly that it's important that Putin does not see this as a moment of opportunity to A, sow more chaos, but B, to think that somehow the Western donor community is distracted or has a preference to support Israel over Ukraine. He must know that our resolve is to support both. He rightly noted that Secretary of State is in the Gulf later this week, and I'm sure that he will want to talk about what he hears there, although he will also, I suspect, want to keep some of that counsel private as we seek to calibrate how we posture ourselves within the region in order to reassure our allies and deter those who might seek to make a bad situation even worse. The Secretary of State was in Washington last week, has had a number of calls with other partners around the region, so too has CDS and I, as part of an MOD-wide effort to make sure that we are constantly calibrating our response alongside those that we traditionally work with in the region, and we make sure that nothing that we do is misinterpreted. Mr. Speaker, the Right Honourable Gentleman and I think are friends, and so it is with some dismay that he dismisses all of my efforts at the dispatch box to keep the House updated on the war in Ukraine. I have stood here as recently as the 11th of September to lead an excellent debate on the matter and given a number of statements on the Secretary of State's behalf. I'm sorry if he is so rank conscious as to deem my efforts unworthy, but I have done my best. Mr. Speaker, the Right Honourable Gentleman is absolutely right to point to the fact that the excellent financial contribution that has been made over the 2 previous financial years is as yet unconfirmed for the next financial year. It will not surprise him to know that that has already been the subject of conversation across government. It's not for me to make that announcement in a UQ or statement today, but a major fiscal event is forthcoming, and so I know he won't have to wait too long. But, Mr. Speaker, that doesn't mean that our plans are uncertain, and in fact I push back quite strongly on the suggestion that they are. I think that for a long time over the last 2 years there's been a sort of a misunderstanding that the UK's capacity to gift is entirely either from our own stockpiles or from our own indigenous industrial capacity. The vast majority of what the UK gifts is what we're able to buy internationally, often from countries that Putin would prefer weren't providing us with that stuff, but we have been able to get our hands on it and get it to the Ukrainians with some haste. And that is exactly the sort of thing that the Honourable Gentleman asked about. It is the small but necessary things, the winterisation equipment, the small arms ammunition, the artillery ammunition, the air defence ammunition. So our ability to buy that whilst in parallel stimulating UK industry, and I reject what he said about contracts having not been placed. Substantial contracts have been placed to directly replenish UK stockpiles for NLAW, Starstreak, LLM, Javelin, Brimstone 155 and 556 rifle rounds. So, Mr. Speaker, as far as I can see, there is a steady-state contribution to the Ukrainians that amounts into the tens of thousands of rounds per month, plus air defence missiles, plus all of the small stuff, alongside the replenishment of our own stockpiles, which, of course, can only happen at the pace at which industry can generate. But nonetheless, it is happening.
Alex Shelbrooke. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My right honourable friend will be well aware of the situation in the Black Sea in terms of sea mines and the way they're breaking loose, and our allies in Turkey who are doing an incredible job in maintaining the Montreux Convention and trying to keep those sea lanes safe. May I ask my right honourable friend if he's having any conversations with our Turkish allies about any support they may need in no matter what way to try and make sure that if they can get the grain deal up and running again and get grain out through maritime, if they need any support to try and make those sea lanes safe, because we are aware that sea mines are indeed breaking free. Minister.
Mr. Speaker, my right honourable friend is an expert on these matters, and can I commend him for the work that he and colleagues around the House do as part of the NATO Parliamentary Assembly to ensure that parliaments across NATO stand united in our support for Ukraine. He rightly notes the importance of the Montreux Convention in keeping non-home ported ships out of the Black Sea, and the Turks have applied that inscrutably. I think Turkey is entirely confident and comfortable in its ability to continue to enforce the convention. Clearly, for other Black Sea nations like Romania and Bulgaria, demining is already a concern and something that they are getting on with. I met with my Romanian counterpart at the Warsaw Security Forum only 2 weeks ago to discuss exactly that.